If you guys have any questions throughout, feel free to put your question in the chat window so the presenters can answer the questions as they come up. We'll also do a question and answer at the end just to make sure everyone's on the same page. We will be recording this, and we will place it on the NECA website later this week for reference if you have any questions further. So I believe we are going to start with Gordon.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Anytime you're ready.
A few items we need to cover before we start the presentation is a definition of competent person found on page 6 of the standards, part 10. And it says competent person means a person who is trained, experienced, and capable of identifying an existing or potential hazard in surroundings or under working conditions that are hazardous or dangerous to an employee, and who has the authority and knowledge to take prompt corrective measures to eliminate the hazards. The second thing I'd like to say to begin with is hand signals is on page 64, and by looking at that page, Appendix A, same standard, Part 10, when using hand signals, the standard method shall be used as follows. Exception: when use of the standard method for hand signals is infeasible, or when an operation or use of an attachment is not covered in the standard method, non-standard hand signals may be used in accordance with sub-rule 1B. And in B it says non-standard hand signals. When using non-standard hand signals, the signal person, operator, and lift director, where there is one, shall contact each other prior to the operation and agree on the non-standard hand signals that will be used. The reason we're having the webinar today, and particularly on the hand signals, is because one of your companies got a citation for failure to have an individual trained in the common use of hand signals, and the training record was not on a person or at the job site. Now, I don't want to use the word circumvent the system, but I will use the word circumvent the system by what we're going to tell you. You can use hand signals that are agreed upon between you and that train operator. It has to be agreed upon and documented prior to lifting. So at your lift plan meeting that says who's on first, second, and third, you all get together and you say how that's going to be. So if there's any difference in hand signals, it's legitimate, but you have to document it. And the other thing I'm going to talk about now and at the end is how to carry a card that says you've been certified to do this. You meet the requirements, if you will, of doing crane hand signals. Now, the first one we're going to talk about is stop. Many times when I'm out there in the field, I say, give me a hand signal and stop, and somebody goes, black power, man. No, that's not right. Not at all, ever. What happens is stop is moving the arm back and forth and only one arm. That's what we use to do that. With the arm extended horizontally to the side, palm down, arm is swung back and forth, palm down. Okay? And always we have that situation of emergency stop. Both palms down, both palms swinging outward and forward. Now, here's where the fun begins. What kind of crane are you running dictates what hand signals you will use. I.e., do I have a trolley up here? That means I've got a tower crane. No tower crane? I don't need to know that signal for this presentation or for that job site. Do you have a lattice boom crane where I've got tracks? You don't need to know how to say to the operator, bring it forward or bring it in reverse. Stop that track or stop that track. Swinging right or left. It's not a situation where I've got a lattice boom crane I don't need to know those signals. I can have them readily available, but if the officer walks up to you and says, okay, bud, tell me, how do you dog this thing? And we'll show you the handles. But what does dog mean? It means stop all operation. Get your hands off the control. And in some situations, if you were in an excavator, you flip the little lever up there and all controls are dead. Some cranes do the same thing. So when the officer walks up and starts talking to you or asking you questions or your people the questions, he has to know what trick the officer is trying to play. He can say all kinds of things. He can ask all kinds of questions. But if I have a hydraulic stick up there and I'm saying I want to boom out or boom in, he needs to know that because that's part of the hand signals for that particular crane. Do I need the same thing for a crawler crane? Sure. He can boom out and boom in. What if I have a whip line or I don't have a whip line? What does that mean? An extra cable up there to pick up with. So as we go through these, I'm going to say this is necessary for a hydraulic crane hand signals. This one is to hoist. It's the right hand in the air, going back and forth slowly, so the operator knows what he's asking him to do. With upper arm extended to the side, forearm and index finger pointing straight up. Hand and fingers make a small circle. Okay? That's the hoist. They all have that characteristic. I want him to go up. What if I want him to slow down? Move slowly. A hand is placed in front of the hand that is giving the action signal to move slowly. I get when I ask how to make the crane operator slow down and move the load very slowly, I get this little inchy. That is not acceptable. It's merely slowing down the hand movement. That compliance officer comes up there and watching you do it, and you put that little inch in or you put your hand up to stop, he's going to know you don't know. And he's going to come and get in your face and write a citation. How do I get this line lowered? I point down to the ground with my right hand and I'm going to turn it in a circle. I'm going down. Okay? No more of the inchy. Here's where it gets a little tricky because I'm going to say in most cases, the kind of work you're doing, you're not going to stand there and say, I want the boom raised or lowered. At the same time, I'm bringing the load up. Most likely, you're going to raise the load, okay, not the boom. But if you need to boom up just a little bit to move direction, you can boom up with a hand out, no movement necessary. Now, what if I want it to come down? The thumb is turned in a different direction. Lower the boom is just this. No movement with the other hand. For the hydraulic cranes, you're going to look at the telescoping boom. I want the telescoping boom to either go up or down. That means I'm bringing the head of that boom down towards the ground. I'm not moving it out. I'm not moving it in. I'm just lowering it. And as you lower it with line on, what happens is it moves that cable just a little bit so that you line up with your load. Thumbs in. Thumbs in. You don't have to move it. Just put thumbs in. But I need a little extension on that. I'm not quite high enough. I want to move it out just a smidgen. It's this way. Pointing out. Now, with both the crawler crane and the hydraulics, I want to swing it. In which direction do I want to go? If my hand's out here, it's to my right. If my hand's out here, it's to the left. Okay? Nice and easy. Raise the boom and lower the load. Hydraulic. And I can do it on the lattice. What am I doing? Left hand down, right hand, pointed up, fingers moving out and out and out and out. That's almost like saying inchy, 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 but it's not really. It's this way. Okay? I don't foresee this happening too much. It will occasionally, but your person who is directing that lift has to know that's available to him. Not on a tower crane. Only on lattice and only on hydraulic. If I want to go the other way, I want to lower this load, my thumb's down, and I'm moving my fingers back and forth. That tells him I want the boom down, and I want to raise the load, take up the slack. When you have a situation like particular on a, well, both of them, the hydraulic and the lattice boom, I want to use another cable. I wanted to use the main hoist. I put my hand on my head. I don't have to do anything more than that. That's my main cable. I may have a jib up there that is my whip line that I'm going to use for other things. But I don't want him to use that. I want him to use the main cable. Now, going to the fun ones. If I'm going to make that crane travel, not just the ball, but the crane travel, I'm going to say this way, all fingers are up. I want to go left, or I want to go right. Okay? I prefer not to have you be lifting personally while you are moving that crane. It's set, it's on timbers, it's set on ground, whatever, and if you try to move the crane with load on, you have the tendency to have your load swing back and forth, and you want to control that. I don't like having people moving crane and travel. Now, having said that, tower cranes are a little bit different. If you look back at that poster, it says travel and also tower travel. That means I can have that trolley move to inch it along or whatever so that I can get it in position that you want. Tower crane being vertical and hung out, and the trolley moves along that hangout side, he has a better ability to pinpoint where he wants that load. And he controls the swing pretty well. Here's the trick question. Trick question is trolley travel. You're out there with a hydraulic or a lattice boom, and that compliance officer says, well, tell me, what is the signal for trolley travel? The answer is real simple. I don't have a tower crane. Therefore, it's not in our plan, our lift plan, and I don't need to know that today. But if you do, there it is. My hand's going back and forth at the bottom. I'm pointing in the direction I want to go. And the tower operator will pick that up and move it. If I need to use the whip line on the big hoist, on the hydraulic and the lattice booms, it's real simple. I put my hand under the elbow, and we're going up and down. But I want to move my crawler crane. Well, that can be done. I suggest you don't. Bring your load or take the load off of your crane. Make the necessary, turn your crane sideways to the building and 90 degrees out. Move your crane where you got to have it. Reestablish the footprint, make sure it's stable, and then you go to the point of not having to do this while you got a loader. He's got his hand in the clenched fist, right? Raising the fist on that side that you want him to go, and you're moving his track. What if I want to have a situation where I'm going to move both tracks? I thought they were closer to I put my hand over and I'm either going forward or backwards, and that'll move the track. Now, the last one I don't see with me, but it's for dogging. Dogging is a situation where I'm telling you, I do not want you to move anything. Take your hands off the controls, flip the switch, push the lever, whatever it is that kills the ability to run that crane. We are set and we're ready. I will tell you this, that, oh, I left in the carrier. And last but not least, dog everything. Put your hands together, and that means dog. Stop. Last but not least, when the officer asks you the questions that you need to know the answers to, if it's not pertinent to what you're doing, you can say that particular question is not pertinent as we have no trolley, we have no whatever it happens to be. I don't have a crawler crane. Why would I have him move his crawlers when I don't have a crawler crane? It's not pertinent. Second thing, we discussed every one of these hand signals that we use today between the lift master, that operator of the crane, and myself. It's in writing, done. Any questions at this point, please? And I've got one other thing to go over.
We don't have any questions so far.
Okay, nobody asked any questions. Let's try to comply to the spirit of the law and say that, gee, I have to have everybody go through one of these every time they go to lift. By the time he's gone through it about 5 times, maybe 6 or 8 times, he may know the hand signals pretty well. What I have found is, in every presentation I've done on this particular thing, is I can go through the slides, I can talk about things, I ask the questions and give an exam, and the answer is nobody gets it, or half of them do. And so I go back through it the second time, and probably 25% more get the idea that they can tell me what the real hand signals are. 25%, 50%, 75% will get somebody hurt or killed. And the point I want to make is we've agreed to create a hand card for your organization that on the back of the card has all the hand signals that you'll use, all of them. And on the front of the card it says, my name is so-and-so, that's the person that will do the hand signals. I have been trained or talked to about the hand signals we will use today by the crane operator and discussed with the lift master on this date, time, and where we are located. Only good for that day, time, and space. And we will have those available with Mike in the next week, if that's what you would like to do. That way you can say to the compliance officer, yes, here's my thing that says I've been trained this morning by the competent person being the crane operator on today's date, and it's on my person and it's available. It is not circumventing the law, but it is doing the spirit of the law. Any questions? No questions.
We have no questions.
Thank you. Ed, you're up.
Oh.
Well, good afternoon. I need you to put me in.
Yeah.
Am I? Okay.
Let me go to see.
Okay. I'm going to get in slide Excuse me a moment, we're just getting our technical presentation. Just give it minutes for technical assistance, okay? One of the things we ask, if you have any questions after our presentation, don't hesitate to call the NICA offices. And there's bound to be some questions that come up later on, and we understand that and appreciate that. So call the NICA offices, and certainly we can get back to you and answer the questions that come into play. Excuse me. Right now, we're going to talk about MIOSHA record keeping. If someone on your staff is responsible for the record keeping, and you supervise them, if they're available, it might be worth a minute or two of their time to attend this teleconference. Again, we're going to go all the many aspects of record keeping, and what's key here is there's this most critical component to an employee's total safety and health effort is an accurate record keeping. Now, the reason being is that injuries and illness data can be identified problem areas. And the more you know, the better you can identify and correct the hazards in workplace conditions. Employers can better administer company safety and health programs with accurate records. And the employee's awareness about injuries and illnesses and hazards in the workplace increases. Workers are more likely to follow safe work practices and report workplace hazards. What records must be kept? Well, there's some forms. MIOSHA Form 300, that's the log for work-related injuries and illnesses, and I'll show you a copy of that in a minute. By the way, those logs are available for you to print off on the MIOSHA webpage. It's available. All these forms are available to you. The next one is the MIOSHA Form 301. That's the Injury and Illness Incident Report. Now, MIOSHA has agreed to accept the Workers' Comp Form 100 in lieu of this form, because it covers all the information that report would need, plus additional information, which helps you to initiate a workers' comp claim, either from the medical or from indemnification or all. And then the MIOSHA Form 300A is a summary of the work-related injuries and illnesses. Now, Construction Safety and Health Division, again, that's the industrial hygienist as well as the safety officer, will review these injuries and illness 300 logs in the 300A summary during an accident or fatality investigation, and is necessary during scheduled or, again, compliant investigations. That kind of tells the compliance officer that, hey, this is a trend. This is maybe what I should be looking for when I walk around and do my inspection. It gives him an insight to the company's management experience in the areas of safety. During the required posting period, that's February 1st, this is critical, through April 30th, compliance with the annual posting requirements will be addressed during all inspections. So they can cite you if you do not have those forms available at the site or posted. Now, this is an example of the OSHA Form 300 or MIOSHA Form 300. And you said, I had no injuries, I had no illnesses during the calendar year. Fine. You're going to have to zero in all of those columns and thus be able to produce that, again, record at the job site. Here's a key thing here. In our technology today, we might not have a need for the hard copy to be there. We might have a PowerPoint projector, I should say a computer or a laptop, or even these phones today, as sophisticated as they are, and that data could be on that particular instrument. So it's available. He can see it. He can look at it. That technique. If he needs a hard copy, the office can make a hard copy and fax it to them if they need it. But again, that's available to you. I mean, the new technology is there, and we should be able to use it. Here's the Form 301. That's the Injury Illness Incident Report. As I said, what that information that they have there is all included in the Workers' Comp Form 100. So you don't have to be redundant. Just use the Form 100, and that meets the letter or the intent of the law. Now, the 300A is a summary of work-related injuries and illnesses. Again, this is something they want to see posted. They want to have that available to them. They're looking at your incident and your severity ratios. And that is driven by, again, the man-hours worked against the incidents, the recordable injuries or illnesses, as well as the severity, the number of lost time days from those illnesses or injuries. Okay? Employee involvement. Again, the employee's involvement, and again, as you know, the MIOSHA Act, as well as the OSHA Act, was designed for labor and how they're involved in the area of their own safety, as well as the management's involvement in safety. So the employee involvement requires employers to establish a procedure for employees to report injuries and illnesses and tell their employee, tell their employee to report. This is critical, especially from the standpoint of your workers' comp and having people returning to work. Are they returning to work and have limitations, restrictions? You want to make sure that when a person is sent off to have medical treatment, that when they return or when they will return, they're able to return with restrictions or without restrictions. You have a liability there, and you have an involvement with both comp as well as any other litigation that might come about. Employers are prohibited from discriminating against employees who do report. Okay. The employee involvement again. Employee and their representatives needs to be involved in the record-keeping system in several ways. Well, one, you must inform each employee of how they are to report an injury or illness to you. Is there a field contact report? Is there an incident report? What kind of format do you use? And again, documentation is critical. Now, limited access must be provided to your injury and illness records for your employees and their representatives. This is limited. Again, confidentiality is critical in many cases. And this is the actual comes right out of the standard itself, and it's B1 parent subparent 1 I through II. To ensure employees report injuries and illness promptly, a means or way for them to do must be developed, and you must tell each employee how your way will work. I'm trying to say, an authorized employee representative is an authorized collective bargaining agent. A personal representative is a person the employee or former employee designates in writing, and also be a legal representative for a deceased or legally incapacitated employee. I'll get it out. Now, when requested, the relevant logs must be provided by the end of the next business day. Names in the log must not be removed when providing the log to representatives. The privacy provision may be applicable for some cases, and we'll go in more detail about when we don't put the person's name on the log and when you don't. But it should have been addressed earlier. Now, access to OSHA 301 is the same as other forms, and that's available to you. And I want to stress right now that if you go on the internet to the MIOSHA webpage, it's in essence, it's a form like a log 300, but it's in an Excel form. And that's great if you have it on your computer system, and that way you can constantly keep your records current. And that's critical there. Now, key thing here is access to the OSHA 301 is same as other forms. Employee, former employee, or personal representative at the end of the next business day has to be available. A representative under a collective bargaining agreement within 7 calendar days may not change for these, might charge for these copies the first time they are provided. Additional copies asked from many be accessed as a reasonable charge for retrieving the copies of these records. Now, multiple business establishments. We know that in our specialty trades that often we have tradespersons who will travel a couple hours at a particular project and go to another project, or we have people who are dispatched from home to go to sites to our customers. These things come into play. That's our real world. Not everybody works for months at a particular job site or even weeks necessarily. So a separate OSHA 300 log must be kept for each establishment is expected to be in operation for 1 year or longer. Now, for establishments that will be in operation for less than 1 year, you can keep the information at your main log. There's no problem with keeping 2 logs, is there? I don't think so, Gordon. If you want to cover your tush,
Keep 2 logs.
keep 2 logs. Records for all of your establishments may be kept at your headquarters location. Now, establishment criteria. And here's the rules. Multiple business establishments, including construction work sites, that are expected to be operational for 1 year or longer. Okay? The rule 2, multiple business establishments, including construction work sites, are expected to be operational for less than 1 year. And that's the actual rule that we've addressed here in our previous slide. Okay, industry exemptions, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time with that, but it's, I guess, been determined by experience, the incidence to severity ratios, and the BSL have determined that a lot of these particular industries, they just don't have a lot of exposure or experience when it comes to losses. They might occasionally have one, but they're not. They don't have the heavy hazard exposures that we know in these industries. So all industries in agriculture, construction, manufacturing, transportation, utilities, and wholesale trade sectors are covered. In the retail and service sectors, some industries are partially exempt. In Part 11, Record Keeping Appendix A lists partially exempt industries. And here's a list of them. And it typically looks like a lot of stores, doctor's office, dentist's office, museums, beauty shops, real estate, advertising services, those types of motion picture, shows, things like that. They have exemptions for record keeping. Don't forget, if there is an employer-employee relationship, MIOSHA standards apply to you. You must provide, under the General Duty Clause, employment at a place of employment free of recognized and potential hazards that will cause death or serious harm. One-on-one, one employee, one employer. Now, size exemptions. I give you exemptions of industries that are exempt from record-keeping requirements. Let's talk about what about the rest of us. If your company has 10 or fewer employees at all times during the last calendar year, you do not need to keep the injury and illness records unless surveyed by OSHA or the Bureau, of Records. Okay. The size exemption is based on the number of employees in the entire company. That means administration, management, part-time, full-time. Includes temporary employees who you supervise on a day-to-day basis in the count. Here's some record-keeping cases. Enter each recordable case on the Form 300 within 7 calendar days and complete the Form 300. Now, I want to stop and say this. What will help you determine if a particular case, an injury, or incident is recordable is that the licensed medical health professional or the clinic or whomever you go to have the kind of medical services in case of an accident, they're called licensed medical health professionals. And they can help you determine, they are professionals, if the person is disabled, has restricted work activities, those types of things. They're critical. So you need to develop a rapport with who your provider could be. Concentra is a typical case. But that's important. And I want to stress to you at this time that maybe it'd be worth your while if you have an agreement with a particular provider that you, in turn, have one of their account executives come in and sit down with you and have an understanding of the scope of work that your company provides or your employees are exposed to. It's critical because when an employee of yours comes into a medical provider, is the licensed medical health professional, be it doctor, nurse, whatever, they have to accept as truth what they're presenting to them. In other words, what the problem was. I lifted 30 ton all day long, that type of thing, whatever. So it's better to have that kind of understanding. The next thing is, it would be wise if you have someone who goes to, again, a licensed medical health professional, that they have an understanding when that occurs, when someone shows up at their door, one of your employees who is injured, that they call your office. They call your office and let them know what happened, and you give them, the authorization to make sure that medical service is provided, and it would be a heads up for you for your workers' comp too. So it's critical. You want to have, when they go off for medical treatment because of an injury, you want to be able to have some return to work documentation, determining if they're restricted work activities or what is happening. Can they go back to work? Or the person never shows up. They just go and get medical service and some way they get home or wherever they go. And that's what you want to be concerned about. How are they going to someone who will receive them, a competent person, who would receive them if they were injured. If they're injured, not just someone who's driving around half injured, half conscious. We don't know what happened. So again, it's critical. The equivalent form which has the same information is readable, understandable, and used by the same instruction as the MIOSHA forms may be used as replacement. And I refer to that as our Excel spreadsheet, as well as the 100 in lieu of the other 300, 300A. Forms can be kept on computers or at another location as long as they can be produced when they are needed. And also within the an 8-hour work shift, or make arrangements with a compliance officer stating that I'll have them sent to you with no problem. Now there's a 7-day window to transfer the information about an injury illness from the establishment to the headquarters for entry. A requested, you must produce and send the records to the establishment within the time frame required. If you have employees who work at several different locations, that's common within our industry, or do not work at any of your establishments, you must link the employee to one of them for record-keeping purposes. An injury or illness occurs at one of your other establishments, it must be recorded on an OSHA law of the establishment where it occurs. If it happens while working away from any of the establishments, the entry could go on a log of the establishment where the employee normally works. Now, a lot of times, there's people dispatched from home. We know that. So maybe I want to go back to the master log. That's maybe the way to go. Or if you got a job that's set up with a job trailer and it's there for a period of time, there's a place to keep the log, 300. Nothing wrong with keeping the log at the job site and having the same injuries or illnesses recorded at the master log. All right. Covered employees. Who's covered? You must record on the OSHA 300 the recordable injuries and illnesses of all employees on your payroll, whether they are labor, executive, hourly, salary, part-time, seasonal, or migrant workers. Employees not on your payroll but who are supervised also must enter on your log. A self-employed person who is injured or becomes ill does not have to be recorded because they are not covered by the OSHA Act of this regulation. Employees from a temporary health service, employees leasing service, or personal supply service are treated as they mentioned earlier. If you supervise, they are to go on your log.
And by supervise, Ed, what they're talking about is if my foreman is directing the work, he's their supervisor, he's responsible for them and their injury and getting taken care of.
Great. Thanks, Gordon. Contractors and their employees are similar in that whoever supervises has responsible for the log entries. Now, temporary services persons should not get entered on their log if you supervise. Duplicates of records should not occur, but it does. Let's face it, it does. Everybody wants to cover their toes from the legal standpoint. Does the injury illness meet the general criteria for an application of a specific case? In other words, is it recordable? That's one of the things we're looking at. Well, here's a general record criteria. And here are the following. An injury illness is recordable if it results in one or more of the following. One or more. Death, days away from work, restricted work activity, transfer to another job, medical treatment beyond first aid, and loss of consciousness, and significant injury illness diagnosed by a licensed medical health professional.
And many times people out there supervising an employee don't have light duty work available to them because they don't have light duty. But another thing about it is, gee, I just restricted or transferred them to another job, and as a result it becomes recordable. Quite frankly, it's recordable anyway. And secondly, if you put somebody on light duty, you can say, you can work in my office, I supervise you. There's no going home for 3 days sitting there watching Sam Bernstein tell them, hey guys, I can do this and get this kind of money for you. You control that situation. It helps your work come. And you do get work out of them.
You know, this transfer to another job, this is sometimes confusing. I mean, I move at 2 hours on this particular project and 2 hours on another project. But we're saying transfer to another job. In other words, what is my normal scope of work? I'm as a tradesperson. This is my normal scope of work. And now I cannot perform that normal scope of work. Now I have to transfer you to do something else. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. is an injury or illness. This is a confusion. This is often a confusion for people. Now, whether a case involves an injury or illness is determined by the nature of the original event. That's critical. Original event or exposure, which causes the case, not by the resulting condition of the employee.
You say it another way, Ed. Put it in terms like, for instance, you have an employee come into your room and say, I got hurt sometime this morning. I can't put my finger on it, but this hurts, and gee, I got to go see the clinic. No event, and can't document an event, puts it on the question mark. Yeah, you're going to take care of them. I was dealing with a clinic over on in Sterling Heights. Very candidly, with a doctor who'd been there for 40-something years doing business. And I asked him one day, Doc, how many back cases in the morning do you see? And he says, oh, probably 30, 40 first time in the morning. I said, what do you attribute it to? He says, the fact they have compacted bowels that causes their low back to hurt, and the only way I get paid is I got to call it a back injury instead of what it is, give them a little pill, get it drop the load, and everybody's all right. That's a fact. So you kind of have to ask, what were you doing? And document the point of injury.
Paperwork. Documentation is so critical. Injuries are caused by instant. Now, here's another thing. What's an injury or illness? Injuries are caused by instantaneous events in the work environment. Cases resulting from anything other than instantaneous events are considered illness. I guess the question, here's one of the questions we ask is a arc flash from a welder, okay, is that an injury or an illness?
It's an illness.
Often people say it's an injury, okay? But what happens is the radiation is accumulated from the arc that's being developed in the welding, and now it affects the eyeball. So not just like that, but over a period of time.
In essence, it is a sunburn of the cornea.
There you go. Now, documented injury is defined as any injury such as a laceration, a fracture, needle stick, puncture wound, sprain, amputation, which results from a work accident or a form of exposure involving a single incident in the work environment. Define a work-related injury. I'll presume work-related when on the employee's premises. Oh, wait a minute. On the employer's premises, I'm trying to say. When off the employer's premises, work relation must be established. Employee engaged in work-related activity. Employee present at the location as a condition of employment. An employee in travel status is engaged in work or a travel function. Hey, I got a bunch of guys that now they're on duty. They're on call. They're on call this week, or they're on call today. Now they're dispatched from home, so they travel from home to the job site, okay, or to the customer. While traveling there, and if they are involved in an accident, let's say they were hurt in a truck accident, somebody hit them, a workers' comp comes into play. Now we have to be concerned about, was this job related? Yeah, it was work related because that was their function, to travel from their home to the client and perform the work as established. Okay, how do I determine if a case is work related? That's always the case would come into play. Case is considered work related if an event or exposure in the work environment either causes or contributes to the resulting condition. A case is considered work-related if the event or exposure to the work environment significantly aggravates a pre-existing injury or illness. Again, you have to know whether your records will determine if they had a pre-existing condition. Symptoms arising in the work environment that are solely due to a non-work-related event or exposures are not work-related. Again, we cannot probably afford in our industry to go and have everybody tested for their hearing, but often, again, they're wearing these buds in their ears, or they got some kind of boom box going, and it's just adding to the noise because of all the ambient noise that is occurring around them. And now they turn it up, and it gets louder and louder and louder. And then with these buds in their ears, what we have today, is the noise again. So they turn it up and turn it up. So we're getting a greater noise exposure to our employees. You might want to consider in your safety program, in your guidelines, about limiting that type of thing. How do I separate first aid from medical cases? Well, medical treatment means that the management and care of a patient is combat disease or disorders. It includes treatment of injuries administered by a physician, registered professional person, or layperson, non-medical personnel. Medical treatment does not include first aid treatment, one-time treatment, and subsequent observation of minor scratches, cuts, burns, splinters, and so forth, which do not ordinarily require medical care. Now, even though provided by a physician or registered professional person.
Ed, let's talk about that for a minute.
Okay.
Because most cases, when somebody says they have a scratch, a cut, burn, splinters, or whatever it happens to be, oh, let's send him to the clinic. I never did that in all the time that I've worked in various industry. What I did as a first aid professional, if you will, made the observation and determined whether or not, yeah, it's deep enough to have stitches. If it isn't, then you don't send him. You take care of it. You clean it out, you put a Band-Aid on it. If it's a burn, how bad is the burn? If it isn't beyond first degree, it's not recordable. And number two, you never put anything but a dry piece of gauze on the burn. If you go somewhere and they say, oh, we're just going to spray this ointment on it to take care of the pain from the burn, they violated their own first aid criteria, because first aid says never anything. Put ice cubes on it. It'll take care of it. But you control it from having your person who you have designated as the first aid person in your company to look at it first before you just inadvertently send them out for quote-unquote treatment.
You know, Gordon, maybe we should address this at this time. Often we're a sub on a project, and first aid is something to be considered. Now, the standard requires that you as a employer have your employees trained in first aid.
At least one.
At least one, that's right. Now, on the job. Now, if I'm just the sole technician or associate, and I'm all by my lonesome,
Hey, I rely on the
911 or whatever.
Yes,
Or
or somebody else is there for that particular job.
And I could be the lone person at a particular job site too, and there's no one else around, and that's possible. Doing service work. I mean, I did a lot of it climbing up and down roofs, doing heating and cooling service work, and I was the only one there. So again, how do we address this situation? Well, if you're in a large enough project, this first aid can be addressed because you can have a designated first aider at the job site. Okay. Now we must know who that person is. That's critical. He must be aware of who that is. So if I come on the job and I'm not first aid trained, or there's two of us and neither one of us are trained in first aid, but there is a first aid designated person on the job, then it meets the letter of the law.
And second, it does not put the individuals who's making that decision for first aid in jeopardy. He is taken care of by the company he works for. So he's not liable for, quote unquote, being sued for making a questionable decision.
Good enough. So these are little helps that we know will help you in the area. Work-related injuries are recordable. Now, medical treatment other than first aid, lost consciousness, restricted work or motion, and transfer to another job. Examples of first aid, and I think you can see it, foreign bodies embedded in the eye. This is a critical thing there, okay? How are we going to remove that foreign body in the eye? I mean, some people are going to take a clean hanky or a Q-tip or something like that to try and do it, or pull their eyelid over their eye, hoping the eyelashes will help, again, remove the particle that's there. But if that can't be handled that way, then it's going to have a medical professional who's going to have to go and do something. Now we're going into an area possibly of recordability. Remove foreign body from the wound, soaking therapy and ointment. Examples of medical treatment, physical therapy, you can see it. Removing the foreign body embedded in the eye. X-rays. Once you've got an X-ray diagnosis, you've got a recordable. Admission to a hospital.
Unless there's no broken bone or no fracture.
Okay.
If the X-ray says negative, you're all right. If it's positive, yeah, you got a problem.
Here's another thing too. That a lot of times we had, is this considered first aid or is it considered recordable? Again, a lot of times you might have a cut, and they use, we call them butterfly bandages. Okay, and we say, well, now it's a butterfly bandage, so it's not recordable. Well, I'm sorry, it is recordable.
Yeah, it's in lieu of, or surgical glue. Good old super glue.
Which we find in major surgeries, and of course was developed during Vietnam. Excuse me. Occupational illnesses. An occupational illness is defined as any abnormal condition or disorder other than one resulting from an occupational injury. It's caused by exposure to the environmental factors associated with employment. This includes acute and chronic illness. Acute means immediate. Chronic means over a period of time. A disease which may be caused by inhalation, absorption, ingestion, and direct contact. And guess what? Noise. Noise comes into play here, folks. We did not have in the construction industry the industrial hygienists monitoring noise levels on our job sites. So be cognizant of that. That's a concern, okay? From your pre-action and your safety program. You might have to buy that PPE, those earplugs, the muffs, whatever necessary.
Well, let's say you had that I'm out there doing whatever kind of work, and I feel bad and all this good stuff, and during the course of a little bit of time, they pull my blood level for lead, and it shows high. But I don't work in that environment, but he wants covered because that's not cheap to reverse lead poisoning. And you do your background, and it comes out that you shoot black powder, and you make your own lead balls and bullets, and that's where you're getting it.
That's right. So again, and there's a lot when it comes to lead and asbestos, again on job sites, just general safety comments is be aware, because in the standard, for example, in an area of asbestos is perceived to contain asbestos. You have to consider it when it's perceived to contain asbestos, as it does contain asbestos, until you can, again, test it and prove that it is not. Again, with lead, they have now little swipes that you can wipe across the surface. Paint particular I'm thinking of, that can determine if you've got a lead in the surface that you're dealing with. So categories of occupational illnesses are skin disorders, respiratory conditions, poisoning, hearing loss. And all occupational illnesses are recordable. Example of illnesses we've just given you. I think. Determine the lost day, days of restricted work activity. This is a real confusing area. The employee was assigned to another job on a temporary basis. The employee worked at a permanent job less than a full time. The employee could not perform all duties normally connected with their job. Lost days, days of restricted activity. Here we go, restricted activity. Day counts. And here's the confusion. It used to be different than this. Eliminate the term lost work days and focus on the days away or days restricted or transferred. So you used to say, well, we didn't count the weekends or when they were normally scheduled or all kinds of things. Days away from work. Include new rules for counting that rely on calendar days instead of work days. Counting days of restricted transfer or transfer. When the injury illness involves one or more days of restriction, transfer, record required. Check the job transfer or restricted column. That's on your log 300. Count the number of calendar days the employee was placed on restriction or transfer.
That includes Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays.
That's right. And do not count the days on which the injury or illness occurred. So the day up, today, the injury illness occurred, I don't count that day. But the next day, it starts. Cap days count for 180 days. So I have an injury illness that occurs, and it's recordable. We put it down on our log, okay? And now I've got more than 180 days left within the calendar year. It says I only have to count 180 days, not the 200 or so days that they would be off the entire fiscal year. Okay, and then they go into the next year. Now I got to start counting. I add all those days of next year into this calendar year. No, we don't do that. So if an employer makes a permanent job transfer, stops counting the days, but always counts at least one day. Medical treatment, the management and care of patients to combat disease or disorders. It does not include visit to a licensed healthcare professional solely for observation and counseling.
You mean to tell me when my electrical engineer reached out to see the tightening on the stabs of 4160 and got knocked on the floor, his time at the hospital being observed for 4 days doesn't count?
Huh.
The answer is didn't count because he's only being observed. There was no damage to his body. He was fully cognizant and aware, and the doc said go back to work. So he lost 4 days, but he didn't count on the log.
Diagnostic procedures. Now, I think we should stop here right and say one critical thing. When you have something that you record, it's recordable on the log, it might not necessarily be compensable. In other words, workers' comp come into play. Or it might not be workers' comp. It might be counted in workers' comp, but not recordable on the MIOSHA law. They are separate. Now, let's say, for example, one of your ladies in the staff is in these icy times that we come in, and let's say they're dressed and they're wearing heels and so forth, and they slip and fall in the parking lot. Okay. Now, they're injured. Besides being embarrassed and probably ruin a pair of hose and whatever else, their clothes, is she injured? Do we send her for treatment, for examination, for whatever? Now, could that be the cost of the medical attention that she got and received, the x-rays that they might have taken, and they were negative? Is this compensable? Yes, it could be. Under workers' comp, it could be compensable, but not necessarily recordable. Right. There's the thing. What is her normal scope of work? Well, not walking in and out of the office, okay? Again, sitting at her desk, doing what she normally does in her scope of work.
But if they're a groundskeeper and slip and fall while they're doing the work, yeah, they are.
There you go. So, what it does not include: visits to licensed healthcare professionals solely for observation and counseling, diagnostic procedures, and first aid. And we'll give you some examples. Work-relatedness. A case is considered work-related if an event or exposure in the work environment either causes or contributes to the resulting condition. A case is considered work-related if an event or exposure in the work environment significantly aggravates a pre-existing injury or illness. And work-related is presumed for injuries and illnesses resulting from exposure to occurring in the work environment. Let me say this. There's times in which, as Gordon and I would sit there as previous MIOSHA personnel, and we would review the logs. And there's times in which many of the cases, because we asked for the backup documents, were not work-related, or I should not recordable. I'll be specific, not recordable. So what we would suggest then to them is always go to your licensed medical health professional, the provider, the clinic that you go to, and have them determine the diagnosis, the prognosis, or those restrictions, what kind of medications are going to be provided. All those things drive if it's recordable and non-recordable. Those are things that you want to go and depend on them. That's what you're paying them money for. That's what's critical. It's important for them. It helps you. It helps you determine it. Sometimes you'll go and list things in your log 300 and you think they're recordable, but it ends up after you get the documentation, after you get the reports back, they're not. Just simply go and take a red line through it and put FA next to it. Everybody will say you're meeting the letter of the law. Be conservative. No problem. Table of work-relatedness exceptions include present a member of the general public. So someone comes and visits your job site, a salesman. Very common, okay? That's not your problem. Their employees are responsible for it. Symptoms arising in a work environment that are solely due to non-work-related events or exposures. Volunteer participation in a wellness program, medical fitness, or recreational activity.
Going to the company picnic and sliding in the second base. You get broke up. You're there voluntarily. The company is not responsible for you.
And I'm cooking the hamburgers and hot dogs on the grill, and I get a burn.
Right.
Table work relatedness exceptions include eating, drinking, and preparing food or drink of personal consumption, and personal tasks outside the assigned work hours. Privacy concern cases. Now, this is critical. This is something that over the years, recent years have changed. An injury illness to an intimate body part or reproductive system. An injury illness resulting from a sexual assault, mental illness, HIV infection, hepatitis, tuberculosis, needle sticks, and sharp injuries. Those are privacy concerns. What do I do about those in the law? Other illnesses, if the employee independently and voluntarily requests, now this is the employee, requests that his or her name not be entered on the MIOSHA law. Examples, a skin disease, a disorder, contact dermatitis, eczema, respiratory conditions, silicosis, occupational asthma, poisoning by lead, mercury, or other materials. Some more examples. Privacy protection must protect them. Do not enter the name of the employee on the MIOSHA Form 300. Write privacy concern case or privacy case. Keep a separate confidential list of the case numbers and employees' names. They, again, will request that. Annual summary. At the end of each calendar year, you must review the OSHA 300 to verify entries are completed and accurate and correct and deficiencies identified. So I know these were first aid. We've indicated that. We go and total all our numbers. We're going to make sure we run our totals, our summary. I could have no injuries, no recordable injuries or illnesses in the calendar year. You still have to fill the Form 300 out. You still got to sum it out, put the summaries down, and those types of things. That still has to be done. So review the OSHA to verify entries are complete and accurate and correct and deficiencies identified. And create an annual summary of the injuries and illness records on the OSHA 300. Certify the summary and post the annual summary. Now, who does the certification? The level of review of your OSHA 300 must be extensive and are necessary to make sure that the entries are complete and correct. And to complete the annual summary of the total columns of OSHA 300, if you have no recordable injuries, you zero each column. Okay, you zero each column. Enter the calendar year covered. The company, the establishment, name, address, annual coverage, number of employees covered, and the total hours worked by all employees covered by the law. If you're using an equivalent form, that's the spread Excel sheet, that's available on the MIOSHA law. Within the 300A, you must ensure that employees access the employer's penalty statements are added to your form. Again, MIOSHA people said, in lieu of a MIOSHA form that we're talking about, the individual report, you can use the Workers' Comp Form 100 in the state of Michigan. They're all under the Department of Labor. Okay, the Comp Bureau is under the Department of Labor. The certification of annual summary must be done by an executive of the company. Who's the executive? Is it high enough? Okay, I go to the CEO. Who do I do? Executive of the company is a person who meets one of the following. He's the owner, only if the company is sole proprietor of partnership. An officer of the corporation, the highest ranking company official working at the establishment, the immediate supervisor of the highest ranking company official working at the establishment. Who that could be. What are they doing? They're forcing you then in management to review the log, to find out if there's trends, if there's concerns, and so you can act appropriately. Wisely spend your safety dollar. A copy of summary must be posted in the establishment in a conspicuous place or place where it's noticed to employees are customarily posted. Now, folks, I'm not exaggerating. I've seen them posted in the inside door of the porta-john. It is there. I've seen them posted inside the gang box. There's many platforms or establishments that they have bulletin boards that they're published on. Ensure it does not become altered, defaced, or covered by any other material. The summary must be posted no later than February 1st of the year following the year covered by the record and kept in posting in the place of April 30th. You've got a point about signing these things.
Oh, yes. What I always did was make sure that I put the date that I posted it up on the wall, sanded and dated it. And when I took it down after April 30th, I also posted the time, date, and place that I took it down and signed it. That way there could be no citation to me if somebody said, well, I don't think it was up there February 1, but there's no way of seeing it. So I covered all those bases and made sure we didn't get got.
Documentation is critical in litigation and in MIOSHA. Retention and updating. You must save the OSHA 300 logs, the privacy case list, if one exists, and the 300A and 301s for 5 years following the end of the calendar year and these records covered. The 300 will have to be updated during the 5-year period to include newly discovered recordable injuries or illnesses and show any changes that have occurred in the classification of previous recorded injuries or illnesses. If a description of the outcome of the case changes, you must remove or line out the original entry and add the new information. The 300A does not need to be updated, but you may wish to do so. The 301 does not have to be updated either, but you may wish to do so. Changes in the business ownership. There's again, your company's being sold or a segment of it is being sold. I can think of some of the mechanical contractors that we've dealt with over the years. They took part of their business and sold it off to someone else. Even some of their own employees bought a portion of their business. All right, so you are responsible for records and report work-related injuries and illnesses for the period of the years during which you own the establishment. You must transfer your records to the new owners. The new owners must save all records of the establishment kept by the prior owner for a period specified in this rule. And no updating of the prior owner records is required. Okay? Fatalities and catastrophes reporting. Again, in accordance with this rule, an employer is required to report to MIOSHA within 8 hours of the time the employer learns of the death of an employee from a work-related incident or inpatient hospitalization or 3 or more employees for a work-related incident.
Warning, warning. What most employers don't understand is that when a police officer, EMS, or fire department shows up on the scene to do whatever it is, and particularly in a fatality, they already have called MIOSHA. So the clock started when MIOSHA got the report from an outside entity. Don't tell them that, gee, I just got told, and now I have 8 hours. Believe me, there is many, many cases on the books already from employers trying to duck that 8 hours. They were told long before that. This age of complete communication is great. By the way, they get bonuses at the EMS, fire department, and police department. If they catch you violating this, they get extra dollars put in their wallet because they call MIOSHA reporting you. You just better make sure you're ahead of that curve.
Now, you could be a subcontractor to a GC or construction manager. So often, from their point of view, protect themselves in litigation, often they want you to report a fatality or just the items that we've talked about, hospitalization, whatever. And I can think of particularly of a client there that's a state university that is very particular about this. They have their own forms they want you to fill out. But again, you have to cover the company's tush. You have to make sure you get that report into MIOSHA within 8 hours, as well as take care of your client or customer. The employer must only report fatalities or multiple hospitalizations by telephone or in person at Lansing MIOSHA office. And they use toll-free number, and it's an 800 number, and it's 800-858-0397. Let me say something, folks. Don't worry about it. They work weekends. They work holidays. They work night and day. They will come out. That compliance officer will be dispatched. I mean, I have been on a site in which there was a fatality, and it was 10 o'clock at night, and the compliance officer was waiting to be released by the police department for them to start their inspection investigation. They will do that. That's another thing you have to remember, too. On a job site, if you have a multiple injury, fatalities, those types of things the local police department has jurisdiction of that job site until they release it. They're going to investigate that. They're going to investigate that. I've watched my OSHA compliance officers stand around for a day and a half, okay, before they could even come on and start making an investigation. So then they have control. And I'm going to tell you, MIOSHA will subpoena or whatever necessary, or get records from the fire department, the police department, the hospitals, everything. And when they do an investigation, they can get all that information. Okay? I want to thank you for your time. I know this is tedious because it's record keeping and it's standards and regulations. But what we're trying to avoid is, one is also citations because you've not kept your records up. And two is, as I said in the first opening comment, is your documentation and record keeping is a great tool for your safety program. And it's going to help you as management or as someone responsible for the logs to determine trends that can occur and where and when and what you must do to avoid injuries and illnesses from occurring again. We thank you for your time. We look forward to seeing you next time. Our next, again, teleconference is going to be covering the changes in all the MIOSHA regulations dealing with the construction industry. We look forward to seeing you in the near future. You have a great day.
Just want to open up the floor for any questions. Feel free to speak or type it in the chat area. Any final comments at all?
Let's see.
Well, how do insurance companies use the Form 300 data to calculate medical needs or insurance needs or rates, insurance rates? Okay. There's a thing called there's a thing called EMR, Experience Modification Rate. And they look at your logs, they look at how much money you've spent or they have spent over the course of 4 years to determine what your experience mod rate is. I went to work for a company that had some problems and had an almost 2.0 rate. What that means is they were paying a premium of 100% above what everybody else was paying. When I left there 8 years later, their experience mod rate was 0.42. So they were actually paying 58% less than what an average company would pay coming into a program trying to figure it out. They look at all your losses. They add and subtract. They figure out how much money you would have been charged had you been an average company. And by doing their math with their protected proprietary formula, if you will, it gives you an advantage over your competitor, or it gives you a percentage of disadvantage. We literally, in 8 years, saved the company $10 million, if a dime, over the course of that 8 years. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Don't hesitate to call me to office if you have questions later on. We'll be glad to answer them.
Well, by the way, when we went through the section of making sure the logs were correct, you, the highest individual in the corporation, signing that piece of paper that says this is accurate, don't give it to your secretary. I liked it when my executive vice president told me, it's my privilege, I'm an officer of the company, I'll sign that. And my answer was, good, then I'm not held liable when they find any mistakes. You go to jail, I don't. Because you can go to jail for mistakes on an OSHA log.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you again for your attendance. And again, we will post this slideshow and presentation to the website here by the end of the week. Thank you.
Have a good day.
So, how many attendees do we have? 5? Didn't get out.
That's why we record it. Because those 5 will go to the division meetings. Guess what they'll do?
Yeah.
Who were the 5? Do you know?
Matt Smith, Ron Fuller, the other ones dismissed off the screen itself.
Ron Fuller from KNF Electric in Ann Arbor. And, okay, I'll see them Thursday night.
Yeah.
I don't know if they
There were others on there as well.
Okay. Because, all these folks come from different parts of the state.
Sure.
They'll